There are 5 forbidden truths your shadow desperately wants to keep hidden, because if you ever embody them, you become unstoppable. Your life will never be the same after this video. That's exactly why it tried to distract you from clicking it, and that's why you must keep watching. Your shadow knows that this knowledge isn't just powerful, it's dangerous. Dangerous to the lies you've believed, the pain you've carried, and the person you've been pretending to be. You are not just in conflict with the world around you. You're in a daily war with something far more intimate, the unseen self within. That subtle voice that delays your dreams, doubts your light, and disguises fear as logic. That's the shadow. It's not some outside force. It's you, the hidden version of you that survives in silence, thrives in avoidance, and grows stronger every time you reject the truth. The shadow doesn't fear punishment. It fears exposure. Because once you see it clearly, it loses its power over you. And these 5 truths are like sunlight to that darkness. The first truth your shadow hates is this: your pain is not your identity. It's your initiation. You've been taught to wear your wounds like a name tag. You've been repeating silent scripts. I'm unworthy. I'm always abandoned. I'm never good enough. But those beliefs didn't come from your soul. They were stitched into you through trauma. Pain was never meant to define you. It was meant to shape you. And when you finally realize that your suffering was the soil for your evolution, something in you awakens. You start to see that the worst things that ever happened to you weren't punishments. They were portals. Openings into a deeper version of you. A version that's wiser, stronger, and more aligned with your purpose. The shadow knows this, and that's why it keeps you stuck in the past. It wants you to identify with your wounds instead of heal them. Because the moment you separate yourself from your suffering, when you finally say, "That happened to me, but it's not who I am," you become free, and the shadow can't survive in freedom. It survives in the loop of unhealed stories. It survives in the belief that you're too broken to rise. There's something important you need to understand. The shadow was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to protect you in the only way it knew how, by keeping you small, hidden, and safe. But safe isn't sacred. Safe isn't destiny. And your calling does not live in your comfort zone. You have to be willing to outgrow your past identity, even if it means walking away from everything that once felt familiar. That's what the shadow fears most. Not failure, but change. Because change threatens its control. The second truth the shadow can't stand is this: you don't need fixing. You need uncovering. The world has convinced you that you're not enough. That you need more books, more advice, more validation to become whole. But wholeness was never something you had to earn. It was something you were born with. You are not a project. You are a masterpiece covered in dust. And the dust came from years of pretending, performing, and pleasing. The more layers you peeled on for acceptance, the further you drifted from your truth. And now, the work isn't to become something new. It's to remember who we've always been beneath the masks. That remembering terrifies the shadow. Because once you start shedding the false identities, you tap into something ancient, your essence. The part of you that's still connected to source. The part that doesn't need external validation to know its worth. That part has always been there, quietly waiting for you to stop running. The shadow's greatest strategy is to convince you that something's wrong with you. It wants you to believe that healing is an endless pursuit, a staircase with no top. But that's a lie. Healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming present. It's about no longer abandoning yourself to meet other people's expectations. Think about it. How many times have you betrayed your own truth just to be accepted? How many times have you silenced your intuition because it didn't align with what others wanted from you? That voice that told you to walk away, to speak up, to dream bigger, that was your soul. And every time you ignored it, your shadow celebrated. Because every act of self-abandonment made it stronger. But something is shifting now, isn't it? You're starting to feel the weight of the lie. You're beginning to crave alignment more than approval. And that is the beginning of awakening. The most dangerous thing in this world is a person who finally remembers who they are. Because once you remember, you stop playing small. You stop settling. You stop allowing your trauma to write your script. And the shadow can't survive in the presence of that kind of power. That's why it resists these truths. Because they don't just wake you up, they burn away the illusions that kept you asleep. You're not here to fit in. You're here to break patterns. You're here to interrupt the generational trauma. You're here to become the version of yourself that your ancestors prayed for. But to do that, you have to be willing to confront the deepest parts of yourself, not to shame them, but to integrate them. Because integration is where the alchemy happens. It's where you stop running and start listening. It's where you stop fearing your darkness and start understanding it. You can't heal what you hate, and you can't master what you avoid. The shadow doesn't hate you. It fears your awareness. It fears the moment you realize that you were never broken. You were buried. And now that you're starting to rise, it's panicking. That inner resistance you feel, that fear, that voice saying, "You're not ready," that's the shadow trembling, because it knows what's coming next. And what's coming is truth number 3, the one that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Because if you truly understood it, your relationships, your choices, and your entire path would never look the same again. Keep watching. The third truth your shadow cannot bear is this: most of your relationships are mirrors, not connections. This is the one that shatters illusions. Because once you understand it, you start to see the people in your life differently. The friends you cling to, the partners you attract, even the enemies you obsess over. They're all reflections of something inside of you, not always something conscious. Often, they reflect the wounds you haven't healed, the love you still withhold from yourself, or the beliefs you refuse to examine. Your shadow knows this. That's why it attaches you to toxic patterns. Because as long as you're surrounded by people who validate your unconscious pain, you'll never break free from it. Ever wonder why the same types of people keep showing up in your life? The same heartbreak in a new body. The same betrayal with a different name. That's not coincidence. That's your subconscious screaming for closure. Your energy attracts what feels familiar, not what is healthy. If love felt like rejection when you were younger, then rejection will feel like love now. If safety felt like chaos, then chaos becomes comforting. It's twisted, but it's how the shadow keeps you stuck. And until you bring awareness to it, you'll keep confusing pain for destiny. But here's the power. Once you recognize the pattern, you can break it. Once you realize that the people who trigger you the most are actually revealing something buried within you, the game changes. That ex who manipulated you wasn't just cruel. They were exposing your hidden belief that you're not worthy of genuine care. That friend who always competes with you. They're echoing your inner voice that says there's not enough room for you to shine. Every projection, every irritation, every emotional reaction is feedback. It's a signal pointing inward. This truth isn't comfortable. It forces you to stop blaming and start owning. The shadow hates that. It wants you to feel like a victim so it can stay in control. Because if your pain is always someone else's fault, then you never have to face the part of you that allows it. You never have to ask the harder question. Why do I keep choosing this? Why do I allow what doesn't align? That's not self-blame. That's self-inquiry. And it's how you reclaim your power. When you stop outsourcing your suffering, you finally take responsibility for your healing. And it goes deeper. The relationships you think are built on love may actually be built on trauma bonding. When two people's wounds complement each other, not their values, not their goals, but their unhealed wounds, it creates a magnetic but dangerous attachment. It feels intense. It feels fated. But it's often just two shadows clinging to each other in fear. You might say, but they get me. Of course they do. They get your brokenness because they're broken in a similar way. But getting you isn't the same as growing with you. This is where you have to be brutal with yourself. Not cruel, honest. Who in your life supports your expansion? Who feeds your truth? And who only loves the version of you that stays small, agreeable, and quiet? The shadow wants you surrounded by people who reinforce your fear. Because once you start demanding higher standards, once you start choosing peace over chaos, you threaten its comfort zone. You begin to outgrow your old reality, and that is the death of the shadow's illusion. The fourth truth the shadow despises is this: your intuition is never wrong, but your trauma can distort how you hear it. Let that sink in. Your inner guidance is sacred. It's the most honest compass you have. It whispers in stillness. It nudges you through discomfort. It pulls you toward what resonates, even if your mind doesn't understand why. But the problem is, when your nervous system is dysregulated, when you're living from fear, hypervigilance, or survival mode, it becomes hard to distinguish intuition from anxiety. The shadow exploits this confusion. It makes fear feel like truth. It convinces you that the worst-case scenario is the most realistic one. And so, you ignore your inner knowing. You overthink instead of trust. You wait for evidence instead of honoring your gut. And in doing so, you hand your life over to hesitation. But intuition doesn't shout. It doesn't debate. It doesn't justify itself. It simply speaks once and waits. If you don't honor it, it doesn't get louder. Your consequences do. How many times have you said, "I knew I shouldn't have done that"? That wasn't hindsight. That was intuition. You felt it. You just didn't listen. And that's what the shadow relies on. Your habit of abandoning yourself. Every time you choose logic that comes from fear over wisdom that comes from inner truth, you feed the shadow. The only way to repair this is through radical self-trust. You have to relearn how to feel, how to sit with your body, how to interpret the subtle signals. Intuition is not a superpower. It's a birthright. But you have to detox from the noise long enough to hear it. That means creating space, silence, solitude, stillness. These are the enemies of the shadow, because in stillness, you hear the truth, and the truth dismantles everything the shadow has built. And once you do that, once you begin listening to the voice within instead of the voices around you, you become a different kind of person, a sovereign being. You no longer move from fear. You move from alignment. And in that space, your life begins to reflect a higher frequency. Opportunities appear. Relationships transform. Chaos starts to dissolve. Not because the world changed, but because your perception did. Because you stopped ignoring what was always there, your power. But we're not done yet. There's still one final truth. The one your shadow fears the most. The one that, once you claim it, burns the whole lie to the ground. If you're still watching, it means you're ready for it. Because the fifth truth isn't about your pain. It's not about other people. It's not even about healing. It's about identity. And it changes everything. Keep watching. The fifth truth the shadow absolutely despises, the one it will do anything to keep you from realizing, is this: you are not your wounds. You are not your trauma. You are not your conditioning. You are not the story the world wrote for you. You are the one who has the power to rewrite it. That sounds simple, even poetic. But when you truly understand it, something cracks inside you. Because most people never do. Most people spend their entire lives identifying with their pain. I'm the abandoned one. I'm the anxious one. I'm the screw-up. I'm the people pleaser. These aren't traits. They're masks, coping mechanisms, defense systems that became identities. And the longer you wear the mask, the more convinced you become that it's your actual face. That's what the shadow wants. For you to confuse survival with self. Because if your pain becomes who you are, then healing becomes a threat to your identity. Growth becomes terrifying. And anything unfamiliar, even if it's good, feels unsafe. That's why people sabotage their blessings. Not because they're weak, but because their shadow has convinced them they don't deserve peace. Let's break that illusion now. Every identity you've ever clung to, the shy one, the angry one, the victim, the outcast, the misunderstood genius, the silent sufferer. All of it was formed in response to something. You adapted. You adjusted. You built emotional armor to survive the chaos, the neglect, the abuse, the rejection. And that armor worked. It kept you alive. But it also kept you small. It kept you distant from your true nature. Because who you really are, underneath the fear, the walls, the masks, is not broken. You were never broken. You were burdened. And there's a massive difference. The shadow cannot survive in the presence of self-realization. The moment you say, "I am not my fear," you start breaking the spell. When you realize you can feel pain without becoming pain, you regain control. When you can observe your thoughts without identifying with them, you create space for truth to emerge. Because here's the deepest secret. The real you is not afraid. The real you is not ashamed. The real you is not desperate for validation. That's the shadow's version of you. The real you is rooted, clear, deeply connected to something higher. The real you doesn't chase. The real you chooses. The real you doesn't react from fear. It responds from wisdom. So what's the problem? You've forgotten how to access that version of yourself. You've been hypnotized by the noise, social pressure, childhood wounds, generational programming, societal expectations. You've been trained to live for approval, to sacrifice truth for belonging, to shrink your light because someone else was uncomfortable with your power. The shadow feeds off that shrinking. It grows stronger every time you betray your own voice just to keep the peace. But here's what most people never do, and it's what you must do now. You must kill the false self. The people-pleasing self, the overthinking self, the performative self, the self that seeks love by becoming who others want you to be. It's time to let that version of you die. That death feels like chaos, like ego death, like spiritual war. Because it is, the shadow will scream. It will claw for control. It will throw every fear, every memory, every projection at you just to keep its grip. You'll feel like you're falling apart. But what's really happening is this. You are breaking out of the cage you forgot you were in. And the moment you allow the false self to fall, something miraculous happens. You begin to remember. You remember who you were before the fear. Before the world told you who you were supposed to be. Before you believed you were unworthy, unlovable, not enough. You remember the part of you that always knew. The part of you that's connected to source, to truth, to creation itself. That part of you is waiting, always has been. And once you meet that version of yourself again, you don't go back. You can't. You begin to speak differently, walk differently, make decisions that confuse people who only knew the older, smaller version of you. Some will call you arrogant. Others will say you've changed. They're right. You've stopped playing small to make others feel comfortable. You've stopped letting guilt dictate your boundaries. You've stopped being addicted to suffering. And maybe for the first time ever, you start choosing you. That's the shadow's nightmare. Because it knows this truth. Once you reclaim yourself, once you stop negotiating your worth, once you stop running from silence, once you stop attaching your value to anything external, you become untouchable. Not perfect, not above pain, but free. And freedom is the death of the shadow. Here's where everything flips. You stop seeing your darkness as something to fight, and start seeing it as something to integrate. You don't conquer the shadow by banishing it. That just feeds it more shame. You conquer it by seeing it, holding it, understanding that it was never the enemy, it was the wounded protector. A scared voice trying to keep you safe in outdated ways. You thank it, and then you lead it. You don't let it lead you anymore. This is spiritual maturity. When you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of me is this waking up?" When you stop performing for the world and start being loyal to your soul. That's the shift. That's the evolution. You are not here to stay wounded. You are here to remember, to rise, to reclaim. And if you've watched this far, it's not by accident. You were meant to hear this. You were meant to awaken, to remember what the shadow tried to make you forget. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are exactly who you need to be when you stop hiding from your own light. The shadow hates these 5 truths because if you embody even one of them, you become unstoppable. But if you embody all 5, you become who you were always meant to be. Now go remember who that is.